Hello, this is Brian Tracy. So many people believe that worrying is a sign of responsibility. They think that if they aren't constantly thinking about what could go wrong, something terrible is bound to happen. They live their lives in a state of tension, anticipating problems, replaying negative scenarios in their minds as if that constant mental rehearsal could somehow protect them. But I have learned, through decades of experience and working with thousands of high achievers, that worry solves nothing. It does not prevent, it does not protect, and it certainly does not improve. It only consumes. It drains your energy, it erodes your clarity, and it clouds your ability to act. The more you worry, the less you do, because you are too busy imagining everything that could fail instead of focusing on what you can actually change. Are you ready to stop suffering for a future that hasn't happened and start living with focus, presence, and unshakable confidence? The first principle you must internalize to cancel worry at its source is a truth so fundamental, yet so few truly accept it. Worrying changes absolutely nothing. I will repeat that, because it is a cornerstone of your mental freedom. Worrying changes nothing. Thinking and rethinking a problem does not solve it. Mentally rehearsing what could go wrong does not prevent it. Imagining 1,000 negative outcomes does not prepare you. It paralyzes you. Worry is a mental trap cleverly disguised as foresight. It gives you the illusion of being busy, but you are not being productive. It creates a sensation that you are doing something about your problems when, in reality, you are only siphoning off your vital energy, the very energy you need to find real solutions. I, too, fell into this trap for years. I would wake up with a knot in my stomach, my mind already racing before I had even opened my eyes, consumed with worry about what the day would bring, what I couldn't control, what might happen or might not. For a long time, I thought this was normal, that this constant tension was simply part of the price of ambition. But it wasn't. It was a slow form of self-destruction. I was burning myself out from the inside without even realizing it, because when your mind is caught in the grip of worry, you cannot see clearly. You cannot hear your own intuition. You don't make decisions. You have reactions. And every single one of those reactions is born from a place of fear, not from a place of power. The real turning point for me came when I forced myself to ask a brutally simple question whenever a worry began to take hold. Does this problem that is consuming me have a solution I can act on right now? If the answer was yes, then the next step was immediate action. Not more thinking. Not waiting until I felt ready. Action. This meant making a difficult phone call, writing a direct email, having an uncomfortable conversation, or adjusting a business strategy. Whatever it was, the key was to act, because every worry that has solution dissolves in the face of decisive action. And if the answer was no, if the problem truly had no immediate solution within my control, then I had to let it go. Not out of resignation, but out of profound respect for my own mental and emotional energy. Because worrying about the uncontrollable is not a sign of maturity, it is self-inflicted punishment. This single principle transformed my life because it handed control back to me. It taught me that your mind can be your greatest ally or your most confining prison, and the choice is yours. When you decide to think in terms of what is useful, rather than what is automatic, everything begins to shift. I started to categorize my thoughts as if they were files on my desk. Is this thought useful? Does it move me closer to a concrete action? Can I resolve this right now? If the answer to any of these was no, I would consciously set it aside. I would write it down to get it out of my head, release it, and deliberately replace it with a thought about something I could control. I learned that letting go of a thought is also a form of discipline. Not everything that appears in your mind deserves your attention. Not every thought deserves to be fed. Herein lies a critical insight. Your mind will not calm down on its own. It will not magically stop worrying. You must train it. Like a muscle, like a powerful tool, you must teach it to release what it cannot change and to focus intently on what it can build. A mind trained in useful thinking is a mind at peace. And from that state of inner calm, you make better decisions, you communicate more effectively, you work with greater focus, and you live with more presence. This isn't because problems disappear, but because you no longer waste your precious resources on things that do not add to the solution. So if you find yourself trapped on the hamster wheel of worry today, I aid you to pause. Take a deep breath. Ask yourself, does this have a solution? If it does, act. If it doesn't, release it. And in that simple, conscious choice, you begin the journey to a freer mind and a more powerful life. The second step to neutralizing worry is to learn to identify the true origin of your fear. Every worry is a surface-level manifestation of a deeper, underlying fear. It is rarely the problem itself that disturbs you. It is what you believe that problem represents about you. You aren't truly worried about being late for a meeting. You're worried that others will judge you as irresponsible or unprofessional. You aren't worried about making a mistake on a project. You are worried about appearing weak or incompetent. You aren't worried about money in and of itself. You are worried about feeling incapable, like a failure, or fundamentally insufficient. Until you uncover that root cause, your mind will continue to manufacture excuses, scenarios, and tensions about anything and everything. The anxiety isn't coming from the external event. It's coming from your internal interpretation of it. When I began to study my own patterns of worry, I noticed something deeply unsettling. It didn't matter how many problems I solved. A new one would always appear to take its place. It would wear a different disguise, but it would generate the exact same feeling of anxiety. I realized the content of the worry was irrelevant. It was a pattern that mattered. My mind had become conditioned to find something to worry about because, in a strange way, that is how it felt useful, how it felt alert. It believed it was doing its job of protecting me. But what it was actually doing was shielding me from a far more uncomfortable feeling, the raw feeling of uncertainty, the state of not knowing, the reality of not having total control. When I understood that, everything changed. I started to look beyond the apparent problem. I would ask myself, what am I actually feeling right now? What am I truly afraid of losing? What image of myself am I desperately trying to protect? Answering these questions with brutal honesty revealed some uncomfortable but liberating truths. I discovered that I often worried more about how others perceived me than about how I actually felt. I found that I was more terrified of criticism than I was of failure itself. I even realized that I sometimes preferred the familiar discomfort of a constant, low-grade worry to the profound silence of being alone with my own thoughts. The silence can be terrifying when you haven't made peace with yourself. This step is transformative because it forces you to stop living on the surface of your life. It pushes you to confront your original fears, those fears you may have learned as a child, reinforced with past failures, and fed with the limiting beliefs of others. When you finally reach that core, the worry loses its power. You are no longer running from external events. You are working on your internal landscape. You are no longer fighting symptoms. You are healing the cause. This requires courage, yes, but it also returns your power to you. When you understand what truly frightens you, you can address it with real tools, with awareness, with self-compassion, and with firm resolve. Today, whenever I feel a worry begin to surface, I don't stop at its superficial form. I ask, what is this awakening in me? What part of my identity feels threatened right now? Is this threat real, or is it an echo of an old wound? And when I find the answer, the thought softens, the tension in my body releases. The problem shrinks from a giant to its manageable, true size. I understood that so often, what worries us is not what is happening, but what we believe it means about us. And that is something you can change. You can reframe it. You can clean it out. To cancel worry is not to ignore what you feel. It is to go deeper. It is to look your fear in the face and say, I see you, I understand you, but you will no longer be in control. Because you are not your worry. You are the one who observes it. And when you learn to observe without reacting, you begin to think with clarity, feel with maturity, and live with lightness. That is where your true freedom begins. The third step to annulling worry is to anchor yourself firmly in the present moment. Worry cannot survive in the now. It is a creature of the future. It is anxiety over what asterisk could asterisk happen, what asterisk might asterisk occur, that never-ending loop of what if. As long as your mind is trapped in that imaginary future, your body will be in a state of tension. Your breathing will be shallow, your heart will race, and your muscles will be tight, even though nothing is actually happening to you in the present moment. This is the most destructive aspect of worry. It makes you suffer for events that do not yet exist, and the vast majority of which will never come to pass. You are, in effect, paying high interest on a debt you may never even incur. I spent years of my life chained to the future. I would sit down to work, and before writing a single word, my mind would be consumed with thoughts of potential failure. I would prepare to speak with someone, And in my head, I would have already imagined every possible way the conversation could go wrong. I would go to bed at night with my body in the bed, but my mind running through a dozen different anxiety-inducing scenarios. The hardest part of it all was that I couldn't even enjoy the good moments when they arrived. My attention was never fully there. It was always on what was coming next, always projected forward, always anticipating that the other shoe was about to drop. The breaking point for me came one afternoon after I had achieved a significant milestone in my business. It was a moment that should have been filled with joy and satisfaction, but I couldn't feel it. All I could think about was the next step, what was still missing, and whether I would be able to sustain the success. In that moment, I understood with piercing clarity that it wasn't reality that was robbing me of my peace. It was my inability to inhabit the present. The only thing that is ever truly real is this moment. Everything else is a mental projection. The more time you spend lost in those projections, the further you drift from yourself, from your intuition, from your strength, and from your truth. Anchoring yourself in the present is not a vague spiritual metaphor. It is a concrete mental skill, and it can be trained. It is trained with your breath, with mindfulness, with conscious movement, with deliberate pauses, with genuine listening, with writing, and with making decisions based on the now, not on the fear of what might come. I started to incorporate simple practices into my day. Before starting my work, I would take 5 slow, deep breaths. I would ask myself, what is happening right now? And I would answer with facts, not with thoughts. I am in this room. I am breathing. I am safe. I am here. This small act of grounding would bring my mind back from the brink, give me perspective, and return a sense of power. This step is fundamental because your mind cannot be filled with both worry and presence at the same time. It is a choice. Your mind is either in the future, generating anxiety, or it is in the now, where you have agency. When you choose the now, everything slows down. Your thoughts become more orderly. Your fear loses its intensity because you are in direct contact with what is actually occurring, not what might happen. And it is from this place of presence that you can act, intervene, and choose with full consciousness. Today, whenever I feel the tendrils of worry begin to creep in, I don't fight with them. I don't try to suppress them. I simply and gently bring myself back to the present. I connect with what I can see, hear, touch, and smell. I repeat to myself, right now, in this moment, I am okay. And from that place of stability, I decide my next move. Your power is not in controlling the future. It is in mastering the present. The present is the only thing you truly possess. It is the only place from which you can transform your reality. If your mind has been a runaway train to the future, I invite you to bring it back to the station. You do not need to solve everything right now. You only need to be fully here, because this is where life happens. This is where you can act with firmness, feel with authenticity, and think with clarity. And when you train your mind to stay here, it no longer needs to run toward an uncertain future, because it begins to trust in your ability to handle whatever comes, when it comes. Not before, not with fear, but with total presence. And from that presence, worry is cancelled, because you are no longer running, you are living. The 4th step to eradicating worry is to transform your relationship with uncertainty. Many people don't realize that what truly paralyzes them is not the problem itself, but the fact that they don't have all the answers. They are profoundly uncomfortable with not knowing what is going to happen, with being unable to predict the exact outcome, with not having complete and total control over the future. But this very need for absolute certainty is, in itself, a constant source of suffering. The real world is not a perfect equation. It is dynamic. It is full of surprises, and it is defined by ambiguity. If you do not learn to relate to uncertainty in a healthy way, worry will become your chronic companion. I used to be terrified of any blank space, of any decision that didn't come with a guarantee, of any path where I couldn't see every single step ahead. Uncertainty made me feel vulnerable. It stole my sleep and made me imagine the worst-case scenarios until I understood something crucial. It is not uncertainty that destroys you, but your resistance to it. When you fight against uncertainty, you turn it into anxiety. But when you accept it, when you lean into it, you can transform it into a source of creative energy, an open possibility, a fertile field where anything can emerge, not just the bad things you fear, but also the best things you can't yet imagine. The mental liberation comes when you shift from trying to control everything to trusting in your ability to adapt to anything. That is what truly matters. It's not about knowing what is going to happen. It's about knowing that you will know what to do when it happens. The focus changes from, what if this goes wrong, to, I trust that I can handle whatever comes my way. This single question, repeated with deep conviction, can extinguish mental fires that you have been feeding for years. To train this new response, I began to consciously, and sometimes verbally, thank each moment of uncertainty. This wasn't some masochistic exercise. It was a way to reprogram my automatic reaction. Every time I didn't know how something would resolve itself, I would say to myself, this is training, this is expansion, this is evolution. By reframing it this way, instead of sinking into worry, I opened myself up to learning, to acting with the information I had, and to observing the situation without judgment. And what I discovered was astonishing. My anxiety levels plummeted. My creativity soared. My self-confidence grew, because my sense of stability no longer depended on external clarity. I became clear within myself. You can do the same. You can stop being afraid of not having all the answers, because who truly has them? No one. Not the most successful people, not the wisest mentors. The only thing that separates them is that they learn to move forward in the midst of the fog. They take a firm step, even if they can't see the entire path. And each step they take illuminates the next one. That is what action does in the face of uncertainty. It carves a path where before there was only mist. This is a perfect moment to invite you, with total sincerity, to subscribe to this channel if this message is resonating with you. This isn't just a place to learn. It's a place to transform. If you are here, it is because you are ready to live with less fear and more power. Do me a favor and leave a comment below. Tell me, what is one decision you have been postponing because you are afraid of not having total certainty about the outcome? Write it down with courage. Just putting it into words is the first step toward conquering it. Remember, you did not come into this world to live on autopilot, avoiding every risk and anesthetizing your mind with worries that lead nowhere. You came here to grow, to try, to fail if necessary, and to get back up and try again. The person who dares to walk without guarantees discovers strengths that the person who waits for certainties will never know. And when you make uncertainty your ally, you become unstoppable. Because then, nothing can truly frighten you, not even the not knowing, because you know that you are bigger than any doubt, stronger than any outcome, and freer than any fear. The fifth step to canceling worry is to shift your focus from what you cannot control to what you can absolutely build. The root of most chronic worry lies in focusing, again and again, on external factors that are not up to you. What other people will think, what they will say, what they will do, what will happen with the economy, with the market, with circumstances far beyond your immediate influence. The more attention you give to what lies outside of your hands, the smaller your own capacity to respond feels. The larger the anxiety grows, the weaker your sense of self becomes. You are looking outside of yourself for peace, when the only real, sustainable peace is built from the inside out. I used to live my life trying to anticipate and control 1,000 things that were not in my power. I wanted everyone to understand my intentions perfectly. I wanted every plan to work without a single flaw. I wanted all the external pieces to align so that I could finally feel secure. But life does not work that way. There is always an element of chaos. There are always unforeseen events. There's always something that doesn't fit into your neat plan. If your well-being depends on the world being in perfect order, then your well-being will forever be in the hands of the world. And that is a surefire formula for a life of constant tension. True power returned to my life when I started a simple daily practice. I would make a list of things I absolutely could control. My thoughts, my decisions, my attitude, my daily routine, my physical health, my focus, the way I spoke to others, my response to obstacles. I made a commitment to myself to guard these things with rigorous discipline. I discovered that what you guard, you strengthen. What you monitor, improves. What you practice, becomes powerful. From that point on, no matter what was happening externally, I felt a sense of progress. I felt I had direction. I was no longer adrift on a chaotic sea, because there's always something you can do, even if you cannot do everything. This step might sound obvious, but the vast majority of people do not apply it. It is far more comfortable to complain about what you cannot control than it is to take full responsibility for what you can. It is easier to say, it's a fault of the system, my boss, my partner, the country, than to look inward and ask a tough question. What can I do today with what I have to change my energy, my direction, and my story? But that is the question that separates the successful from the stagnant. It pulls you out of the victim role and places you firmly in the author's chair. And when you begin to write your own life with responsibility, your worries shrink because your personal presence grows. Today, when something begins to unsettle me, the very first thing I do is draw a mental line. On one side, I place everything I can influence. On the other, everything I cannot. And then I mentally discard the second list. I let it go. I release it. And I focus 100% of my energy on what I can build, on the conversation I can have, on the step I can take, on the habit I can reinforce, on the attitude I can choose. This daily practice not only keeps me stable, it keeps me strong. I no longer waste energy trying to command the wind. I use that energy to adjust my sails. If you are surrounded by worries, do this today. Write down everything that worries you. Next to each item, mark whether you can truly control it. Cross out everything you cannot. Erase it from your field of attention, because what you cannot control has no right to steal your peace. And what you can control has the power to transform you if you work on it with discipline. That is a great divide between the person who lives in anxiety and the person who lives with focus. One is waiting for the world to accommodate them. The other is building their world from where they stand. You do not need the world to change to have peace. You need to change your focus. The sixth step to annulling worry is to consciously reconstruct your system of beliefs. So many of the things that cause you anguish today do not originate in your present circumstances. They come from ideas you adopted years ago without ever questioning them. They are inherited beliefs, repeated phrases, and assumptions that you accepted as absolute truths. Beliefs like, if I don't succeed, I am worthless. Or, if I don't control every detail, something will go horribly wrong. Or, if I don't meet everyone's expectations, I am a failure. These invisible sentences are the silent drivers of your constant worry. They impose an impossible standard upon you. They push you to demand perfection from yourself, not out of a desire for excellence, but out of a deep-seated fear. When you live under the tyranny of such beliefs, any mistake, delay, or criticism becomes a direct threat to your very identity. For a long time, my own mind was filled with these toxic ideas. They were automatic thoughts that would whisper, you cannot fail. You must be prepared for everything. If you don't do this perfectly, no one will respect you. I genuinely believed that this was what it meant to have high standards. But in reality, it was slavery disguised as discipline. It was anxiety disguised as ambition. When your core beliefs are contaminated, your entire way of living becomes tense, rigid, and heavy. And the worst part is, you often don't even know why. You just feel the constant pressure, the fear, the exhaustion, and you normalize it. The change began for me when I took the time to literally write down all the phrases I would repeat to myself in moments of stress. When I read them on paper, I was struck by a powerful realization. Most of them weren't even mine. They were ideas I had heard from others, absorbed in childhood, been taught by the culture, or reinforced by teachers, bosses, and even well-meaning people who were themselves operating from a place of fear. And in that moment, I understood a profound truth. If these ideas could get in without my permission, they could also be removed and replaced. I could choose new beliefs that were more accurate, more humane, and infinitely more useful. I began to rebuild that system from the ground up. I started to consciously repeat new, empowering phrases to myself. Phrases like, I can learn from every outcome. My value as a person is not dependent on my performance. What I cannot control does not define me. My peace comes from how I walk the path, not from the final result. At first, of course, a part of me didn't fully believe these new statements. But through consistent repetition, through gathering evidence of their truth in small, daily internal victories, my mind began to adapt. The brain learns through repetition, not through pure logic. If you repeat something with conviction for a long enough period, it becomes your new operating truth. And from that new foundation, worry has nothing left to stand on. This step is absolutely vital because your mental life is built on invisible foundations. If those foundations are weak and cracked, everything you build on top of them will be unstable. But if you reinforce them with clear, powerful beliefs that you have chosen for yourself, you can live with profound stability, even in the midst of external chaos. You will no longer depend on everything going right to feel right, because your well-being will come from within. It will come from what you believe, from what you choose to think, and from what you refuse to allow into your internal dialogue. Do this today. The next time you feel a wave of worry, listen closely to your mind. What is it saying to you exactly? Write it down. Read it out loud. Then ask yourself, is this actually true? Does this help me? Does this build me up or limit me? If it doesn't serve you, change it. Rewrite it. Repeat the new version. You are not a slave to your thoughts. You are their architect. And every word you choose to feed is another brick in the mental home you inhabit every single day. The seventh step to canceling worry is to completely redefine your relationship with error. So often, the worry that consumes you has little to do with what is actually happening in the present. Instead, it is rooted in a deep-seated fear of making a mistake, of not doing something perfectly, of failing and being judged for it. When you live with this constant terror of erring, your mind enters a state of perpetual vigilance. Every decision becomes a source of anxiety. Every step is fraught with doubt. You end up paralyzed, not by actual mistakes, but by the ghost of what might go wrong. This is one of the most insidious forms of worry. For years, I confused error with failure. Every time something didn't go exactly as I had planned, I interpreted it as a sign that I wasn't good enough, that there was something fundamentally wrong with me. In response, I would demand more of myself. I would worry more, I would prepare more, but I wasn't doing it from a place of self-respect or a drive for excellence. I was doing it from a place of fear, and that fear made me doubt myself even when I had every reason to be confident. When you believe you are not allowed to fail, it doesn't matter how much you prepare. You will always feel insecure. You will always live with tension, and that tension is the very fuel that worry feeds on. The great shift occurred when I changed one single belief. An error is not the end of the road. It is part of the road. An error is not the enemy. It is a teacher. I began to see every mistake not as a stain on my record, but as a necessary step in the construction of my character. No one becomes strong without stumbling. No one achieves greatness without taking risks. No one reaches true mastery in any field without having failed many times before. This truth, while uncomfortable at first, is profoundly liberating. It gives you permission to try, to move forward, to make decisions without the crushing burden of having to be perfect every single time. I started to ask myself a new set of questions whenever I felt worry about a potential mistake creeping in. What is the absolute worst thing that could happen if I get this wrong? And what is the best thing that could happen if I try? What if the very thing I am so afraid of actually happens? Could I learn from it? Could I adjust my approach? Could I carry on? And the answer was always yes. Always, because an error is an integral part of any courageous path. The only person who makes no mistakes is a person who does nothing. But that person isn't truly living. I did not come into this life to avoid errors. I came to build a life of purpose. And that is done step by step, with practice, with consciousness, and yes, with mistakes included. Today, I celebrate my mistakes. Not because I desire them, but because I understand their value. Every time I miss the mark, my mind gets stronger, my strategy gets sharper, and my intuition becomes more finely tuned. That is real progress. That is why I no longer allow the fear of error to steal my peace. I no longer overthink for days before taking a step. I decide, I act, and if I make a mistake, I correct my course. I would rather be correcting my course while in motion than be sitting perfectly still in a stagnant bubble of meaningless worry. If you are worried today about making a mistake, ask yourself this. What is the worst that can happen if you fail? And what is the best that can happen if you try? That comparison is often enough to bring your mind back into balance, because fear always magnifies a negative and minimizes a possible. But when you face it head-on, with logic and courage, it shrinks. It dissolves. It loses its power over you. An error does not define you. Worry does not define you. What defines you is how you choose to act in spite of them. The eighth step to annulling worry is to fortify your mental environment. No matter how much inner work you do, if you are constantly surrounded by voices that feed fear, complaint, and drama, your mind will inevitably be pulled back into a state of tension. Worry is not born solely from your own thoughts. It is also fed by what you consume, who you talk to, and what you listen to every single day. If you are not selective about what you allow into your mental space, you will end up living someone else's life, carrying their anxieties, absorbing their limits, and worrying about things that were never even yours to begin with. It took me a long time to understand this principle. I used to think I could maintain my inner peace regardless of what was happening externally. But that's not how the mind works. The mind is porous. It is permeable. If you spend your day listening to news reports about how the world is in crisis, that there is no hope, that people are untrustworthy, and that nothing works, your nervous system registers that information as a threat. Your body believes it. Your internal dialogue adapts to that narrative. And the worst part is, you don't even notice it happening. You just feel more tense, more tired, more worried, and you can't figure out why. But you need only look at your environment to find the answer. I made some radical decisions in my life based on this realization. I stopped watching toxic news programs that thrive on fear. I unfollowed social media accounts that promoted comparison and negativity. I drastically reduced my contact with people who always had a new problem, a new complaint, or a new conflict to share. And yes, at first, I felt a little guilty. It felt selfish. But I soon understood that protecting my mental health is not selfishness. It is a fundamental responsibility. You cannot serve the world if you are broken on the inside. You cannot create anything of value if your mind is clouded by secondhand tension. You cannot live in peace if your environment is designed for the opposite. So I began to choose with intention. What books do I read? What podcasts do I listen to? What conversations do I feed with my attention? What environments do I frequent? Over time, this external cleansing became an internal fortress. I no longer reacted to problems in the same way. I no longer felt that automatic, knee-jerk anxiety that came from living in a constant state of perceived threat. My environment was no longer pushing me toward worry. It was supporting my focus, encouraging my growth, and returning me to a state of calm. You can do the same. You don't need to cut everything out of your life at once. Simply begin by observing. What external stimuli increase your level of worry? What sources of information knock you off your center? Which relationships drain you mentally? Write them down. And then, without guilt, begin to set boundaries. Protect your mind as you would protect a small child, with firmness, with love, and with clarity. Because what you let in becomes what you think about, and what you think about becomes your mental reality. Your environment isn't everything, but it is a massive part of the equation. And when you take your peace seriously, you must also take seriously what you allow to surround it. The ninth and final step to canceling worry is to reclaim your ability to make decisions with speed and conviction. A vast amount of worry is nothing more than unmade decisions. Your mind fills with noise, static, and anxiety when you procrastinate, when you doubt endlessly, when you circle a choice without daring to commit. This is utterly exhausting because there is nothing more draining than the mental in-between. That place where you are neither here nor there, where you aren't moving forward or backward, where everything is on pause, but your mind continues to spin relentlessly. I lived for years trapped in that state of indecision. I would have ideas, goals, and clear opportunities right in front of me, but I would be paralyzed by the possibility of making the wrong choice. I wanted to have all the information, every possible scenario analyzed, and a full guarantee of success before I moved. But while I was waiting for that perfect clarity, the only things I was accumulating were more confusion, more stress, and more worry. The truth is this: clarity does not always come before you decide. Very often, clarity comes asterisk after asterisk you decide, when you are in motion, when you commit. That is when the path reveals itself. I came to understand that making decisions with determination does not mean being impulsive. It means trusting your judgment, your intuition, and your experience. It means accepting that you do not need 100% certainty to move forward. If you wait for that, you will never do anything significant. You will spend your entire life calculating, planning, and overthinking while time and opportunities pass you by. I began to apply a simple but powerful rule. If a decision is taking more than a reasonable amount of time and no new, relevant information is forthcoming, I choose with what I have. I move, because even if I make a mistake, I am in motion. And when I am in motion, I have more data, more learning, and more opportunities to adjust my course. In a state of indecision, however, I have only paralysis, mental noise, and escalating worry. Here is the key point. A made decision releases a tremendous amount of mental energy. It closes open loops in your brain. It gives you direction. It dramatically reduces anxiety. It allows you to put your full attention on execution, not on doubt. The most corrosive kind of worry is the one that comes from feeling trapped between options, from not knowing which path to take. But what most people fail to understand is that it is not life that has trapped them, it is their own lack of decision. And that is something you can change this very day. Make a list of the decisions you have been postponing, both large and small, the ones that spin in your mind every night. Then, one by one, make them. Choose, commit, act, because deciding is a form of mental house cleaning. It's taking out the trash that accumulates every time you hesitate. When you get into the habit of deciding with firmness, your mind gets into the habit of trusting you. It learns to focus, to stop inventing tragic futures, and to start building new realities. It is not your intelligence that has you trapped. It is your fear of failing. But that fear is conquered the moment you choose to move in spite of it. Power is in action, not in doubt. A mind that moves with action leaves very little room for worry because it is no longer imagining. It is busy creating. It is no longer paralyzed. It is present. It is no longer scattered. It is directed. We have covered the essential principles for canceling worry from your life. It begins with understanding that worry changes nothing, but action changes everything. It requires digging deep to find the true root of your fear, anchoring yourself in the power of the present moment, and learning to embrace uncertainty as an opportunity. It is about focusing only on what you can control, rebuilding your beliefs, and changing your relationship with error. And finally, it is about protecting your environment and making swift, decisive choices. If what I have shared with you today has been of value, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel for more principles on success and personal achievement. Like this video if you found it helpful, and share it with someone you know who is carrying the unnecessary burden of worry. And now, I want you to comment below with the one action you will take today, based on these principles, to reclaim your peace of mind. Your peace is not found by chance, it is built by choice. And your greatest power lies in the choices you make, starting right now.